Hey there, Andrew here, welcoming you to another episode of Research and Reviews. In this episode, I will be sharing my experience switching from Verizon cellular services to Xfinity and back again. So check it out. Xfinity advertises cut-rate cellular services using the Verizon network. Being a Verizon customer already, I was thinking this might be a good move because, yes, the service is fantastic, but it is a little bit spendy. So I took a trip down to the Xfinity/Comcast office, and there they explained how they were able to save me about half on my cellular service, plus an extra $25 off on my internet service, and they were offering per line a $100 cash back rebate. And for me, that was going to amount to $300. Nothing to not like about that. After checking the Xfinity website, I was able to confirm that all three of the phones on my plan were compatible with their service. I decided at that time that we would go ahead and keep my wife's phone and keep my sister's phone, but replace mine because mine had a defective power port. So we started with my wife's phone, and they began the process of porting her number over to the Xfinity service. As that was in progress, then the associate came to me and said, I'm sorry, we've got some bad news. It turns out your sister's phone isn't compatible with our system after all, and she's going to require an upgrade. This was a problem for two reasons. Number one, I hadn't budgeted for two new phones, only one. And secondly, my sister lives 2 states away, so I can't just drop a phone in her hand. But by this point, we were about a third into the transfer process, so I decided I'll just bite the bullet. I'll buy a new phone for my sister. As the transfer was completing for my wife's phone, the associate came back with more bad news. It seems that according to the Xfinity's system, I was exceeding the $3,000 purchase limit that they capped their customers at. This was a surprise for me because nothing in this order even remotely came close to $3,000, and the associate acknowledged that. Unfortunately, the system was convinced I had reached that cap, and we were now unable to make the purchase for my sister's phone. Scrambling for ideas on how to make this transaction work, the associate suggested perhaps I ship my old phone to my sister for her to use. Unfortunately, as I've already mentioned, it had a defective power port. Then the associate suggested that the new phone that I was purchasing would go to my wife, and that her old phone would then go to my sister, and I would just continue on with a gimpy phone. This was completely unsatisfactory because my sister was going to then have to have a phone downgrade to move to this new service, and I would still have a messed up phone. At this point, my blood pressure was beginning to rise to critical levels, and I just said, fine, stop, we're done, turn everything back to the way it was, cancel everything. That, unfortunately, was easier said than done. Regarding my new phone, they were able to reverse that transaction, and so that was taken care of. There was, however, a problem with my wife's phone. The associate wasn't able to port my wife's phone back onto Verizon, though. To get that done, I was told I would have to go back to Verizon and have them do the switch. Seriously? Unfortunately, yes, seriously. So off to Verizon I went, and I spoke to a nice associate who told me that this was not an uncommon situation, and they began the process of unscrambling this monumental mess. Things came to a screeching halt, though, when the Verizon associate realized that they could not port my wife's number back to Verizon without Xfinity's blessing. Again, seriously? And unfortunately, yes, seriously. So I placed a call to Xfinity, and I was lucky enough to be able to get the associate who had handled this debacle from the beginning. I gave the phone to the Verizon associate, and I let them arm wrestle it out. Finally, the mess was untangled, and we were back fully on Verizon, thankfully. Now, to be fair, I have to believe that the cascade of problems that I encountered couldn't be the norm when making this kind of a switch. Otherwise, Xfinity wouldn't be able to stay in business. That said, my experience was nothing short of ghastly, and I will never, ever, explore Xfinity cellular services again. So that's all for now. I'll see you next time.